the Grouchy Nerd. Alright, quiet down, knuckleheads. My new recording space isn't ready yet and won't be for quite a bit longer than originally anticipated, so I'm coming at you in a closet, because I don't want to get too far behind, and this game it just keeps on coming out. I need Evergiven to get stuck again. It's time for another look at a new hero pack for Fantasy Flight Games Marvel Champions. This time we're looking at Nova. However, if you're an old bastard like me, it might not be the Nova you're thinking of. Well, Richard Rider, this is a family channel, got his powers when he was imbued with the entirety of the Nova Force, becoming Nova Prime. Sam Alexander gets his powers from his helmet, a special black Nova helmet from his father, Jesse, who was part of an elite branch of the Nova Corps called the Supernovas. The helmet itself is what gives him his powers, so he's lost it a couple of times, including once when the Nova took it back because he was unregistered. That sucks. With those powers, Sam has fought alongside the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Avengers. He joined the Avengers for a while, but eventually he and a few of the other young heroes split off and formed the Champions when they were disillusioned by the way the adults acted during the second superhero civil war. So let's take a look at him. On his hero side, we have Nova, who has 1 thwart, 1 attack, and 2 defense. He gets a hand size of 5 and 10 hit points, and the Champion trait. When you use one of your basic heroic abilities, ready Supernova Helmet, which is nonsense until we see it, so let's just move right along. On his alter ego side, Sam Alexander has a recovery of 3. His hand size goes up 1. He trades the Champion for Civilian trait, and for an alter ego action, pay a resource to search your deck and discard piles for the Supernova helmet and put it into your hand or into play if that resource was a wild. And of course, they put the Supernova helmet all the way at the end again, so we're just gonna skip to there for now. It's a 1-cost unique upgrade with the armor trait that gives Nova the aerial trait and exhausts to generate a wild resource. A signature economy card that you can search for that readies when you use a basic ability and it has aerial. You know I love aerial. What do you know, your address. Back to release order, we start his kit with an ally version of Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, who costs 3 to get out, does 1 thwart, 1 attack, has 3 hit points, and the Champion and Inhuman traits. As a hero, when you play an event, you may exhaust her and do a damage to her to return that event to your hand. Yeah, what a great way to ally-fy her hero ability. Even if you only get to do it 3 times, that's still going to be 3 pretty good turns, and if you have any way to heal her or to extend that, that's just going to keep being great. It's great. Next up, 2 copies of Force Field Projection, a 1-cost event with the superpower trait. As a hero interrupt when a friendly character would take damage, prevent up to 3 of that damage, and then deal 3 back if you used a wild resource to pay for it. That is insanely good. 1 resource to prevent 3 damage is already good, but if you used a wild resource to prevent that damage, you're also going to do 3 back. And it's not to just the villain, it's not to the attacker, it's just to an enemy. Even if you only blocked 1 bit of damage, you still get to do that 3 back. Then we've got 3 copies of 2-cost event Lightspeed Flight, which has the superpower and thwart traits. Double the number of wild resources generated when paying for this card. As a hero action, remove 3 threat from a scheme. So 2 to remove 3 unless you paid with a wild, and then it's only 1, and it's from a scheme, not the main scheme. Always love seeing that. Next up is 3 copies of Pot Shot, another 2-cost event that only costs 1 wild. As a hero action, deal 4 damage to an enemy. The attack version of Lightspeed Flight. 2 for 4 is fine. 1 for 4 is pretty good. It's pretty good. Then we get 2 copies of a really wild one, Unleash Nova Force. It's a 1-cost event with the superpower trait, and there's max 1 per round. Until the end of the round, each time Nova defeats an enemy or removes the last threat from a scheme, ready Nova and draw a card. I mean, with the right board state, which means things have probably gone very, very poorly for you with side schemes and minions, this card can make for some big turns. Big. Huge. Next is 2 copies of a resource card, Connection to the World Mind, which is the source of the Nova Force. This wild generating resource card does not count toward your hand size. That's incredible! Not only is it a wild, which you you want as many of those as Nova as you can possibly get. You've already seen why, but it doesn't count as a card in your hand. So if you draw it when you're drawing up at the end of your turn, you draw that, you just keep on, you draw another one. Then we've got our trusty dad card, Parents as Supports. Seems to be a theme in this wave. I can't wait to see what we get with the pig. Sam's is Jesse Alexander, a persona support that costs 2 as an alter ego action. Exhaust Jesse to shuffle 1 copy of Connection to the World Mine, that was the resource card that doesn't take up a hand slot that we just saw, from your discard pile into your deck, then draw 1 card. That card is great to see as often as possible. It's a free free wild resource in your hand. That's great. Of course you want to see this. And the pulling the Connection to the World Mine from your discard pile into your deck comes after the cost arrow, so you don't have to have done that in order to get the card draw. At the very least, you still get to draw a card with this guy, which makes him better than Miles' dad. The bad stuff. Nova's obligation is Weight of the World. While this is in play, you cannot ready the Supernova helmet, and as an alter ego action, exhaust it to get it out of the game. And this one shuts down the machine pretty hard. You get used to using that helmet twice a turn, and then this makes it so you can't, well, you can use it possibly one more time, depending on if this came out before or after you used it to pay for like a defense event or something like that. But yeah, this is going to shut you down pretty well until you take care of it. So take care of it very fast. Nova's signature side scheme is Bring on the War. It comes to the party with 2 threat on it and makes you discard a card with the printed wild on it, which you're probably going to have. If you do, you also have to put another threat on the scheme for good measure. And it has the stupid hazard symbol. Nice that if you don't have a wild resource for whatever reason, it only comes in with the 2 threat on it, so it's easy to get rid of. Nova's nemesis minion is Warbringer, a particularly badass Chitauri. He gets the Brute and Chitauri traits. He thwarts for 1 and attacks for 3. But that attack is going to go up 1 for each card in your hand with a printed wild resource, and it has overkill. Man, that's a well-designed signature Nemesis set there. It's just really, really specifically designed to mess Nova up, which is great, but it sucks. But that's good that it sucks so much. We've got 2 copies of a Treachery War Delivery. When revealed, spend a wild resource or you get attacked by the villain and Warbringer, even if you're in alter ego. That's insane. If you flip down to alter ego because you need to do some recovering and you happen to not have a wild resource in your hand when this pops up, I mean, that's game over. You're done. You can't defend. They're just going to both hit you and you probably aren't all the way healed up. That's mean. Last is the War's Been Brought. It has Surge, which just feels unnecessary, because when it's revealed, you discard X cards from the encounter deck, X being the total number of printed wild resources on cards in your hand, under your control, and in your discard pile. So it just burns through the encounter deck, hurtling you toward an acceleration counter, and I don't like that. Moving on to his aspect cards, Nova came with the Aggression aspect. Up first is a 2-cost ally you can only play if your identity has the champion trait, the Locust, played by Fernanda Rodriguez. After the Locust enters play, add an aggression event from your discard to your hand. I mean, we haven't seen what this pack has to offer yet, and there are some doozies, but right away, I mean, that's Mean Swing, that's Dive Bomb, that's a Moment of Triumph. This is a really, really good card. 3 copies of a 1-cost event. Pitchback is next. This one you can only play if you have the aerial trait. As a response, after your hero attacks, deal 4 damage to an enemy. 1 resource for 4 damage is really good, and it's going to be bonus damage because you've already attacked, and there's no limit on this. So if you happen to have all 3 of them, you can play all 3 of them. If you can afford them. But if you can't afford them, you can play all 3 of them in the same response window. So it could be attack and then 12 more damage. However, it is worth noting that even though it does have the aerial trait, and you have to have the aerial trait to play it, it is not a team building exercise target because it is a response to an action, and using team building exercise is starting a whole new action. So you have to play this before you trigger any other cards, so you can't use that one. Then we've got 3 copies of No Quarter, a 2-cost event that requires at least 1 physical resource. As a hero attack action, deal 4 damage to an enemy. For each point of excess damage, discard the top card of your deck and add each discarded aggression card to your hand. Now here's one of those cards that changes the way you might approach building a deck. You might build a deck entirely around this card. It gets better the more red you have in your deck. So your signature cards and basic cards are going to whiff on this, but if you have a deck of mostly aggression cards, if you even push that 40 to 50 card limit closer to 50 so you can pack as many aggression cards in as possible, this card can set up some pretty wild turns, especially if you consider that when you play this and you are drawing cards because you overkilled a minion, you are still in the overkill reaction window. If you draw a card like Chase Them Down or Moment of Triumph, if you draw a card off of that, you can immediately play it for its use because you're still in that reaction window. Next is 1 by 1, a 1-cost event. As a hero attack action, deal 2 damage to an enemy. If it defeats that enemy, do 2 damage to another enemy. I am less enthusiastic about this one, but it's still not bad. If you are able to defeat a minion with that first bit of damage, you can then do that again. So at a baseline, if you can take something out, you're going to be doing 4 damage for 1 resource. Great maybe in Ultron when you have a load of the Ultron drones and you know you can take a couple of those out. Really good, I guess, if you do have a bunch of those minions to set up a turn for Unleash Nova Force. Great in Miss Marvel, who's in Biggin, will boost both of those attacks though, so she'll be doing plus 2 damage, I think, so she can be doing 4 damage with each of those attacks for 1 resource. So that's really good for her, and she can bounce that back because of her ability. Then 3 copies of Fluid Motion, a 1-cost upgrade with the skill trait. After you play an attack event, exhaust this to give your hero +1 to their attack until the end of the phase. It's a bummer. It's an understandable bummer that you can only do 1 of these off of 1 attack, but there isn't a limit to how many you can have out. So if you have a bunch of cheap events, you can trigger all 3 of these and make your attack go up by 3. Really good for any hero that can ready. Obviously, Nova can do that, potentially. Captain America, great in him. Quicksilver, great in him. There's other ones. You probably know who they are. Also, I have dibs on Fluid Motion as a band name. I think we probably do trip hop or maybe some light flute-based jazz. Hey, you want another card that you can build a whole deck archetype around? Sister, you got it. Hone Technique is an upgrade with the skill trait that costs 3 resources, but 2 of those have to be mental resources, and you're only allowed 1 per player. As an interrupt when you play an aggression attack event, if you paid for that event using at least 1 mental resource, increase the event's damage by its printed cost. How good is this card? When I was writing this, I had to take it out of the deck so I could figure out if I thought Nova was any good, because this card just kept winning the scenarios. Every time. It's good. It is good. Melee does 12 damage with this, because it does 3 damage boosted by 3 2 times. 6 on 2 different targets. Melee. Also, how good this card is, I hate taking more than 1 copy of a card that I can't have more than 1 copy of in play, but oh boy, I'll do it with this one just so I'm sure to run into it. And then it has a mental resource of its very own that it generates, so even once you get the one out, the other one is still very useful. Next, our first basic card is an ally that happens to fit in very nicely with Hone Technique and all those mental resources. Moon Girl. She costs 3 and has 3 hit points. She does 2 thwart and 2 attack, but she takes 2 consequential damage each for those. She has the champion and genius traits, and you can only play her if you have the champion or genius traits. After you play her, draw a card for each mental resource you used to pay for her. That's so good. I mean, the 2 consequential damage is butts. That is butts. I assume that's because she's riding around on a dinosaur. There's got to be some risk involved in that. Certainly a transportation liability that is maybe outside of the normal scope of things. But really, get her out of play. Who cares if it's 2 consequential damage? It's really cool when you get her into play. Because for Nova, with all of his wilds, or Wasp, or I know we haven't looked at her on this channel yet, but Ironheart also has a whole lot of synergy going on with mental resources. This is a great card because you might be able to completely replenish what you paid for. Those 3 cards might be coming right back at you. Then a new basic resource card, Everyday Hero, which generates a wild. If you spend this while you have the civilian trait, it can be played for any identity and then heal that identity by 1. So regardless, it's a wild icon, right? But you can only use the stuff. They're using it for another identity and for healing that identity by 1 if you're using it while you're a civilian. And in every case so far, all of our civilians are alter egos. Meaning you have to be an alter ego to use this for that effect. Outside of Nova, because you want those wild resources, you want as many wild resources as you can get. Outside of Nova, I don't see myself running this card ever. Not ever. Not probably ever. Then we've got a 2-cost support Champions Mobile Bunker. Boy, Marvel heroes and their flying bases. It has the champion and vehicle traits, and for a hero action, you can exhaust it to choose an identity with the champion trait to draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards. I mean, that can turn your entire hand around. You can exchange 2/5 of your hand. Better yet, you have the option to exchange 2/5 of your hand. Worst case scenario, you just end up exactly where you were. Then we have a Justice card, Yaw and Roll, a 1-cost event with aerial and thwart traits. You may only play this when you are aerial. After your hero thwarts, remove 3 threat from a scheme. So it's the yellow thwarty pitchback. Great value at 1 for 3, although I feel like it's probably not as good because there's not going to be as many opportunities to take 3 threat off of a scheme after you've already thwarted. But if you need it, that's great. You're certainly not going to have as many opportunities to use them back to back to back like you might with pitchback, but whatever. Last up is a 1-cost protection upgrade, Height Advantage. With the aerial and tactic traits, while you have the aerial trait, reduce the damage you take from each enemy attack by 1. Discard it when your next turn begins. Yeah, it's nice. I feel like it's probably best in a tanky protection deck when you're playing multiplayer and the protection player is trying to take as many attacks from other players as possible, which doesn't really wow me. And I think we all know it's best to end a deck and end a video on a feeling of, Nova is a blast to play. Pun very much intended. He's explosive. You can do so much damage with him, even on turns that don't feature Unleash Nova Force, but on turns that do feature Unleash Nova Force. Whew! Yeah, it's good. He's really good. Yeah, getting aerial from your helmet, of course, opens up things like dive bomb. He's a beast. He's a beast for damage. He is just a beast for damage. Thwarting can be a little bit of an issue, but if you can do enough damage, it doesn't matter. He's burned through everything. Like and subscribe and all that other dumb stuff I'm supposed to say. And hey, if somebody on Reddit's like, I like this game, who can I watch? You could be like, well, this guy doesn't suck too bad. Anyway, that's going to do it for Nova. Once again, I'm in a closet. Now get off my lawn. The Grouchy Nerd.